we've got some never-before-seen Final Fantasy preview cards, and they are powerful.
I'm Mia, and my foot hurts when it rains.
I'm BZ. I listen to thunderstorms to help me go to sleep. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Wizards of the Coast?
Thank you so much to Watsi for making us ambassadors of the set. If you want to learn more, click the link below. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
Nerds
at checkout, you could save 5% of your Roll My Tax dollars on your entire order, which includes new matte sleeves. Amber? Amethyst? They are both awesome.
Do we have to get a cat and name it Amethyst? Maybe. We're also sponsored by Moxfield. Not now. Later. We're going to bamboozle you. You're never going to be able to guess where it is. But we've got 3. Count them. 3. Never before seen. Brand new preview cards from Final Fantasy. We are going to be getting into them, plus talking about which commanders we think they work with and which other cards you can use alongside them. We're going to get a little brewy, you know? We're going to figure out where these cards actually go and what makes them strong.
I'm super excited. The first one is a card that BZ has a lot of attributes of cards that BZ really likes. It's Elixir. 1 mana for an artifact. BZ loves the small artifacts. This artifact enters tapped. If you pay 5 mana and tap it and exile it, shuffle all non-land cards from your graveyard into your library. You gain life equal to the number of cards shuffled into your library this way. Fully recovers HP and MP. I think that's a super cute flavor win.
That's really, really funny. You gain life, and I guess MP canonically is cards in your library. So this is a weird one. This is not a card you just go throw in any deck, but it does get my wheels turning of like, how can I build around this? Because it reminds me of Elixir of Immortality, which is 1 mana, and you can pay 2, and I think you shuffle it into your deck along with your whole graveyard, and you only gain 5. This says there's no limit to the amount of life you gain, and it also shuffles in non-lands. All of your lands will stay in your graveyard. That's going to have to be a factor as we build around it, because the cost to pay to do all this is 5. It's like really expensive, so we have to make it worth it. One of the cards that first comes to mind with this, since we're gaining a large amount of life at once, is Nykthos Paragon. 4 white for a 4/6. Whenever you gain life, you may put that many +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Do this only once each turn.
That is such a great way to buff up your entire team. This is going to put so many counters on your team because I feel like you're not going to use this unless you're shuffling 10, 12, 14 non-lands into your library. And that is mid-game, mid to late game, depending on your strategy. So that would be a gigantic way to swing in for a ton of damage, especially since this doesn't need to be sorcery speed.
Yeah, it can be hard to gain lots of life in one burst. Life gain decks usually end up at 100 life, but it's because of like Soul Lord and Extort and stuff. So this Elixir can be a good way to just get your life, you know, from 40 to 50, and then Nykthos Paragon sees that and goes, hey, great, cool. Here's like a Crater of Behemoth level thing. The only problem is, since it shuffles non-lands, you can't just rely on fetch lands a bunch. You have to have a bunch of instants and sorceries and things. I don't think you're playing life gain and self-mill, but this is one card to consider if you want big numbers of life boosting.
Honestly, I know we talk about it a lot, so forgive me for sounding like a broken record, but MDFCs, lands and spells. I have a deck that plays around with life gain, and being able to ding yourself for life lost to bring in those MDFCs on the land side untapped isn't that big of a deal when you're gaining life, which is what you want to do with this. And since they're not lands on the front, you shuffle them back, and it just gives you more cards to be able to gain that life.
That is a good way to get a bunch of extra spells in your deck that can go to your graveyard to make this thing better. The other way I'm thinking you can go with this is Accomplished Alchemist. That's 3 and a green, 2/5, taps for a mana of any color or X mana of any color, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Now, since we're playing green, maybe it's easier to get stuff into our graveyard, to have 7, 10, 15 creatures in there, or spells, whatever, some combination of those. Crack it, pay that expensive upfront cost, and get it all back plus more with the Alchemist.
Hopefully all of your spells are all in the same color, because this only adds mana of 1 color, but if you're able to do that, you can make a ton of mana off of this.
I mean, just fire off an X spell, play, some kind of like green enchantment that enchants a land that now it can make white, like a Utopia Sprawl or something like that. There's ways to go with this. Pretty sweet. The other thing, and maybe this is too janky, maybe I'm going crazy, Bolas' Citadel is the one card I think of with this. It's 3 black for an artifact. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, but you got to pay the spell's mana value to cast the spell for free, so you lose that much life. And then tap, sacrifice 10 things. Each opponent loses 10 life.
I love the fact that you said, I think this is going to be a little bit janky, but hear me out. Bolas' Citadel, a game changer, one of the best cards in Commander. But for real though, if you're gaining all of this life and you're going to be offsetting it, you got to use it somehow. And if you're not Aether fluxing or something, Bolas' Citadel is a great way to use it.
Well, here's my thought process. Stay with me. Bolas' Citadel, it's a great card by itself. It makes any card look good. But I think Elixir does have some synergy with it a couple different ways. Bolas' Citadel is going to throw all of the instants and sorceries from the top into your graveyard. There are maybe some other things that self-mill along the way, like if you hit cast a Citrus Supplier, sure. Other stuff like that. It's going to help your graveyard naturally fill itself. When you fire off Elixir, you recuperate a lot of the life that you just spent on the Citadel, but it doesn't shuffle lands back. So when you reorder your deck, you get to, save yourself from drawing a land the first time you do it when you shuffle everything. And then now there's way more spells in your deck. So presumably, if you thin your deck that much and you got 10 lands in the graveyard, they don't go back and you can sling spells better after Elixir goes off.
I'm also thinking about the fact that this is 6 mana, and then it's 5 mana to tap, sack, get all the life. So presumably, you need a ton of mana to do this, or Bolas' Citadel has to stay out for at least a turn, which in my experience, people like to kill that right away. But if you can get all of that mana, that will be such a fun thing to do.
I mean, one thing Bolas' Citadel also does, though, is it rips mana rocks from the top of your library. So I think you could get to 5, or you have 8 mana, and you spend 6 of it, and then you accumulate, the other 4 somehow with like a Hedron Archive. Look, there's a lot of moving pieces. It seems pretty cool. One card that I think you definitely want to pair with Elixir is Mesmeric Orb. 2-mana artifact. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. This is like the turbo mill, best way to mill players based on the amount of mana you spent. It's 2. You set it down and you forget it, and it just mills people like crazy, ensuring you have a very full graveyard. So if you're trying to mill everyone, this is a way to just go, nope, not me, shuffle all my spells back. Your opponents are still being milled under this Mesmeric Orb. Even if they get out from that, you've got a deck stacked full of spells.
Mesmeric Orb is not only a mill card, but it's seen as a threat to a lot of players. The amount of times I've played Mesmeric Orb, milled people for a couple, and even, there's one graveyard player who's like, this is great, and the other two is like, we have to kill this immediately. They just milled over XYZ, now I can't do ABC, and it's worrisome, especially the fact that it comes down on turn 2.
It is not uncommon to untap 10 permanents, even in the mid-game. On turn 6, I'm probably untapping like 10 permanents. It's not that big of a deal. Creatures count, artifacts count, all this stuff. You don't need 10 lands just to mill 10 with Mesmeric Orb, so it does build up very fast, and that's exactly the type of card you want to pair with Elixir. That helps make it more appealing than a Elixir of Immortality, for example. But as for commanders, you might want to put Elixir into the 99 of. Specifically, I'm thinking Asterion the Decadent is pretty cool. He's a 4-black-white for a 4/4 Death Touch lifelink at the beginning of your end step. Choose one. Feed. Target opponent loses life equal to the amount of life they lost this turn. Or friends, you gain life equal to the amount of life you gain this turn. So if you're combining life gain and mill, you get to sort of double up on the amount of life you would have gained with the Elixir.
This is one of everyone's favorite cards from Baldur's Gate, or at least favorite characters. I do know a lot of people are very loving on Asterion, but being able to have that gigantic life gain jump from, it's like, oh no, they gained 20. Oh no, they just gained 40 because Asterion's out now. That will set you miles apart, because I know people are like, life, like we say a lot, life total isn't the indicator of whether someone's winning or losing, but I'm a lot more scared of the life game player when they're at like 120 versus when they're at like 45.
That's how you get Aetherfluxed. It really is. Next, this is one of your commanders, so I'll let you read this very wordy magic card.
Oh, this is Sorin of House Markov from MH3, if you didn't remember. 1 and a black for a 1/4 lifelink extort. At the beginning of each of your post-combat main phases, second main, if you've gained 3 or more life this turn, exile him, return him to the battlefield under his owner's control. He has a backside called Sorin, Ravenous Neonate. He's a planeswalker with 3 loyalty when he comes in. You can extort with him out, and +2, create a food token, -1. Sorin deals damage equal to the amount of life you've gained this turn to any target. That does include players. And -6, doesn't usually come up, but gain control of target creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. Put a lifelink counter on it if you control a white permanent other than that creature or Sorin. Sorin is very fun. Being able to have something like veto out or something and then zap people, along with the fact that if you can't get that third person down, you just go, okay, well, I've gained so much life this turn, I'll just zap you too.
Yeah, Elixir is our card that definitely requires the most work. But I think there's some stuff here. We were pulling some cards out. I'm like, I might put this in a deck. That seems pretty cool. And we're only going stronger as we go to our next preview card. This is our second one, The Final Days. 2 black sorcery, create 2 tapped 2/2 black horror creature tokens. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, instead create X of those tokens, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and it has flashback for 4 black, black. So this is a really decent payoff. There's some similar cards. Reminds me of Spider Spawning and Revenge of Rats, which both do see some play. But the thing I look at this that's a little awkward is 6 mana is kind of a lot. But what if we just like cheated that a little bit? There's definitely some ways to do that.
One of the ways to do this is Sphinx of Forgotten Lore, 2 blue for a 3/3 flash flyer. When it attacks, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. Flashback cost is equal to that card's mana cost. So you have to either give this haste or wait a turn to make sure it attacks, but you will be able to cheat that mana cost by at least a couple.
Yeah, I love being able to flash it in on end step, or flash it in and block a flyer or something, or even just play this early. Use it for value, over the first couple turns, that's fine. And then when you get to the point where your graveyard's huge and you have a bunch of options, maybe you could save some mana by using this and just, save 2 mana off of it. I almost put Snapcaster Mage on here, but that's 2 mana and then you have to pay 4, so you're paying 6 instead of 6. At least with the Sphinx, you're doing other things also, and it has like a very useful body on the board. Here's a really interesting one, though, that there's no question this is really cool. Counterpoint. 3 blue-black for an instant. Counter target spell. You may cast a creature, instant, sorcery, or planeswalker spell from your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the spell's mana value without paying its mana cost. So you hole up this for 5, counter like their 6-drop, and then go, cool, on your turn I'm going to make 12 tapped 2/2s. Then I get to untap and use them right away.
Yeah, we get it. 5 is a lot to keep up for instants and sorceries, especially counter spells. I know we talk about cheap interaction a lot, but if you have a deck that can really utilize these flash speed spells, or you can just keep up a lot of mana and pour it into something else, then you will have the ability to do this. And it's super cool. If you counter a giant X spell or something, you are able to cast something really big out of your graveyard too.
Yeah, it's not like I'm saying Counterpoint is a great Magic card, but it's a really cool synergy with this. And I think there's a lot of ways to think about these preview cards and just cards in general that make me more interested in building towards a goal or something. We also have Diviner of Mist. This is a pretty sweet card. It's 4 and a blue for a 4/5 flyer. Whenever it attacks you, mill 4, then you can cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard with mana value 4 or less without paying its mana cost. And if that spell will be put into your graveyard, you exile it instead. Here's one that we just play and we don't have to spend any more mana on it. We just attack with it. It fuels itself, so it mills 4. We can increase our creature count. Then we get to cast Final Days and get a bunch of dudes.
I mean, there's so many instants or sorceries in your graveyard that are going to be able to be targeted with that 4 or less effect, whether that it is this card or whether you're doing like Fact or Fiction or, Deep Analysis or something like that. You're going to have a lot of targets for this, and I really appreciate that.
Also, if you mill something like Final Days, Diviner of Mist doesn't target or anything, so you get to mill the cards before you choose what to cast. That's not how a lot of these spells work, but this one works the best way for you. And these are all just janky ways to cast Final Days from your graveyard for less than 6. You can also just cast it for 6 and get some value. You could also just play a Baral or something and have it be reduced and get the value that way. So that's just one aspect of the card that we wanted to zero in on because it's kind of funny. And one note though, if you're trying to do this, you cannot get the bonus effect by using any cards that say exile a card from your graveyard, then copy it like a Spell Twine or a Mnemonic Deluge. They exile it so that you're not casting it from your graveyard.
Very specific, but it is an important distinction. But there are a few commanders. I feel like there are a lot of commanders can work with this, but one of them being your favorite, Carador.
My boy, Carador Ghost Chief. And I don't think we read Carador too much on this channel. As much as I
we
talk
just
about
assume
him.
you guys know because
assume.
he loves him so much.
Well, it's 5 white, black, green for those who don't know for a 3/4 that costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard. And once during each of your turns, you can cast a creature spell from your graveyard. You can't cast Final Days with Carador. You can do it with Cast if you really wanted to, but Carador is the creature deck. You're milling and putting a bunch of creatures in, then you mill over this and you flash it back, even without it ever going into your hand.
It's going to matter. The creatures in Carador's graveyard build up immensely. There's also Bladewing, Deathless Tyrant, 5 red-black for a 6/6, flying haste when he deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker. For each creature card in your graveyard, see the synergy, create a 2/2 black zombie knight creature token with menace. This is going to care about you filling it up your graveyard to begin with, and then with the Final Days, you're going to be able to create a bigger board even than this is going to give you, and that's going to give you a very big board to start with.
Yeah, it's sort of like a second copy of Bladewing. I don't think Bladewing had a ton of effects like this. They pretty much can just play Revenge of Rats, which only makes 1/1s. So this is an upgrade on that, and maybe you can weaponize 2/2s in a little bit of a different way. And, while we're here, a Zoni Thousandite. It makes 1/1s equal to the creature cards in your graveyard, costs 6 mana for a 2/3, and you can sack creatures to gain life and draw a card. Just another angle. You could take this, you could go the all Golgari creatures in my yard count, where you're playing 50 creatures in your deck, and one of the only spells is the Final Days.
There are so much synergy with graveyards. I love the fact that you can take it so many ways. But we have another card that we are previewing. It's very, very cool, and it's not something we get to talk about that often. Blue spells. We're not usually blue mages, but we are previewing Louisoix's Sacrifice, which is so cool. Blue for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you sack a legendary creature, or you pay 2. Counter target activate ability, triggered ability, or non-creature spell. This is such a cool counter spell. It's cheap, especially if you can keep your commander in play or can get it out very, very quickly, and most decks can use it as a 1-mana counter spell.
Yeah, if you're backed into a corner and you're going to lose the game to something, pretty much any deck has the ability to cast it for 1 mana by sacking your commander or something else you have laying around. I think this card is pretty strong. It does shine the best in like a Legends Matter deck, so that's like a small percentage. But the fact that you can still just cast this for 3, that's not busted. I hate disallow, but I think one of the things this does over disallow is give you the ability to cast it for way above curve, which is just 1 mana. 1 mana counterspells are very good. We know Swan Song is amazing, an offer you can't refuse, and this feels like it's in that realm.
I think so too, especially if you have very cheap commanders, 2 commanders in the partner decks or something like that. Or if you just have a bunch of Legends Matters, Joda decks looking at you, this will be able to shine in there. Plus, it says activate ability and triggered ability. That not just non-creature spells, but it's like, okay, Thassa's Oracle's a thing on the stack. Like, okay, well, I'll let everything resolve, but with the ability on the stack, I'll counter it. Now you don't have a library.
Even countering, we're not going to be experiencing that. Maybe in the higher games they might do that, but
we have some spice.
How about a big ETB? How about a Tali? You could maybe let the Tali resolve because you don't want it to go back to their command zone, but then you stifle the ETB with Louisoix's Sacrifice, and they go, oh, I didn't want that to happen. Enjoy your 7/7, buddy. I think this is really sweet, and we're going to talk about some cards that are in the 99 that work well with this, but they are all legendaries because cards that you just play that fuel your game plan that happen to be legendaries go super well with Louisoix's Sacrifice, like Fibblethip the Lost, little buddy, 1 blue 1/1. It just enters and draws a card. It's got a bunch of other text that is mostly comedic, and it's like a little Elvish Visionary. In your Blink decks, you just throw this in, and now this card is Louisoix's Sacrifice is always 1 mana.
Poor buddy, he's so disposable, but he's
Sure
great
is.
for this spell. The other one being Lorn of the Third Path. We play this card so often. 2 and a white for a 2/1 Vigilance. When she enters, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. If you tap her, you and target opponent each draw a card. Well, the card drawing is nice if you need it. Mostly we use her as a white Rex Sage, but now she can be sacrificed to make this spell cost 2 less also.
Yeah, now we can just trim most of the mana value off of our counterspell. I don't know. This, with all the plethora of random legendary creatures that fulfill normal, utilities in the 99, this could be one of the better counterspells that we've gotten in the last 5 years. I'm really excited to try this. I think it is a genuinely powerful card. I'm also thinking of some of those legends that maybe overstay their welcome a little bit. Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff, I love you, buddy. You're white-black for a 2/1, and whenever a player casts their second spell, you lose a life and you make a treasure. I love you, but sometimes I'm at 8 life. Sometimes I'm at 12 life for making too many treasures. And you're like, you see the other players trying to trigger Lotho, and you're just like, ding, down to 7. Ding, okay. No. Lotho, go to the graveyard. I'm going to sacrifice you with my counterspell.
And you know that they're never going to swing at you at that point because they're like, oh, you want to block with Lotho. You're not getting that because he's going to kill you for all that damage anyways. So they're just like, okay, well, now here's a good way to get rid of him when he's overstayed and he's just a little too useful now. There's also Sutira, Speaker of the Tajuru. If you remember her from Foundation's Jumpstart, pretty specific. 2 and a green for a 2/2. When she enters, search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. When she attacks, you can return a land you control to its owner's hand. When you do, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Mostly this is just find a basic stapled onto a legendary body, elf legendary if that matters, but you're going to be able to sacrifice her when she gets her value.
If you are a Simic gamer and you play things like Wood Elves and Farhaven Elf, here's a Farhaven Elf that is just the same card but better, and it happens to be legendary. Make the 1-for-1 swap, and now Louisoix's Sacrifice is much more appealing for your deck. You're like, oh, if I have 4 or 5 legends in my deck that I'm not devastated sacrificing, that I'm not going to get 2-for-1 off of, I'm going to play this card and it's going to be as good or potentially better than an offer you can't refuse. And Sutira is definitely one of those, no shame if you don't remember this ever existing, but it is a strictly better legendary Farhaven Elf.
You can't copy it, but that's okay.
That's fine. You still get the ETB if you copy it. We also have Emery, Lurker of the Lock, 2 and a blue 1/2 with affinity for artifacts. Enters, mill 4. Tap, choose an artifact in your graveyard. You can cast it this turn. This is a card that you don't want to play it mill 4 and then sacrifice it to the counterspell because you get 2 for 1. But if you play it early, it sticks around, you cast 1, 2, 3 artifacts with it. Later, I'm not upset throwing it away to save mana or stop a triggered ability or something.
Emery is so great because you can use her over and over, and she's usually not the target of a lot of people's removal spells unless you have such scary things in your graveyard that they're like, we can't let that get back. But I feel like that once you cast a few artifacts, she does kind of just sit around. It's like, okay, well, I can't mill anymore and my other stuff is on the field. I'm not going to be able to cast anything lately. Yeah, I would rather really have a counter spell or a counter target ability or whatever.
Yeah, and when we talk about what commanders this card goes best in, it's kind of like the world's your oyster because every commander helps fuel it, but the easier your commander is to cast, the more Louis Suave Sacrifice is perfect for you. I think a lot of decks are going to want this card. I really do. One really cool one that you brought up because you've built it in the past is Jalira, Master Polymorphist, 3 and a blue for a 2/2. You can pay 2 and a blue and tap it and sacrifice another creature. Reveal until you hit a non-legendary creature. Put that onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom. This deck loves playing the Fibblethrips, the Illyrios and Raptured. Is that his name?
Yeah,
all those like little dorky legends that do something. And you polymorph them into like a Hullbreaker horror.
You need all of the legends to be in your deck because you don't want to be hitting all these 1-2 mana little guys and you're like, oh, well, I spent 3 mana to polymorph into this. No, you want to be hitting the gigantic dudes, the ones who you are cheating mana by sacking and stuff. But if you have all of these legendaries laying around, it is going to be great sacrifice fodder for the card.
And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, what if we just didn't care about our commander at all? Rograk, Son of Roga, is a famous 0 mana 0/1 with First Strike, Menace, Trample, and Partner. Making waves in CEDH just because he costs 0 and fuels Fierce Guardianship and Deflecting Swat and like all of the rituals that like sacrifice a creature to make mana. So silly. We could use him in a similar fashion if you have a Rograk. This is a great card to just go, hey, emergency, break glass, sacrifice Rograk, counter the spell for just 1 mana. I love the flexibility of Louis Suave Sacrifice where sometimes I'm okay casting it for 3 because I'm ahead or I don't have a legend and it's not that big of a deal. I can factor that in. But a lot of the time I'm going to go, cool, I have a legend in play. I'm not afraid to lose it. Hold up 1 mana, feel great about it.
I want to see this card in action. I want to try playing it. I think it's very cool. And I think in the higher power levels, it will be seeing some play. But if you want to see any more Final Fantasy stuff, we have Precon review. Do you like Precons? Right here.